A billionaire suddenly saw a little boy running towards him, tears streaming down his face. But when his eyes stopped on the boy's shirt, his heart suddenly clenched. The Miller family's living room, once filled with the warm clutter of memories, now echoed with the soft scrape of packing tape and the occasional sigh. Cardboard boxes, labeled with shaky black marker, books, kitchen, Evelyn's room, were stacked unevenly against the wall. Joseph Miller, a broad-shouldered man with a weary smile, crouched beside a half-filled box, carefully wrapping a chipped picture frame in old newspapers. His hands moved methodically, but his eyes lingered on the image. A beach trip from years ago. Sharon laughing under a floppy sun hat. Evelyn and Jimmy squabbling over a sandcastle in the background. "Joseph, are you done with that one yet?" Sharon's voice drifted in from the kitchen, light but edged with a tiredness she couldn't quite shake. She appeared in the doorway, her auburn hair pulled into a loose bun, a streak of flour on her cheek from the cookies she'd baked to keep the children occupied. "Almost," Joseph replied, setting the frame gently into the box. "Just, taking a little trip down memory lane." Although he spoke in a casual manner, Sharon understood the significance of his words. She wiped her hands on a towel and leaned against the doorframe, her eyes softening. "We'll make new ones, you know. Smaller place, but just as many memories." Joseph nodded, offering a faint smile. "Yeah, smaller place, fewer bills, fewer headaches." From the far corner of the room, Evelyn, the younger of their two children, piped up. "Fewer places to hide too. Jimmy won't be able to find me during hide and seek." She sat cross-legged on the floor, meticulously organizing her collection of stuffed animals for the move. "Hide and seek isn't about hiding," Jimmy countered, perched on the arm of the couch, a book open on his lap. His voice carried the self-assured tone of an older sibling. "It's about strategy." "Oh, and you're such a strategist," Evelyn shot back, her eyes narrowing in mock challenge. "Enough, you two," Sharon interjected, the corners of her mouth twitching as she stifled a smile. "Evelyn, finish packing your things. Jimmy, stop pretending to read and start taping up those boxes." Jimmy groaned, closing his book with deliberate slowness. "I was reading," Sharon smoothly replied, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. "Now, help out." The room settled into a quiet rhythm again, the sounds of packing interspersed with Evelyn humming a song under her breath and the distant hiss of water from the kitchen sink. Outside, the evening had darkened, the streetlights casting a soft glow through the sheer curtains. Then a sound, faint, almost imperceptible at first. A creak. Joseph froze mid-reach, his hand hovering over a box of old tools. "Sharon," he called, his voice low, "did you hear that?" "Hear what?" Sharon stepped closer, her brows knitting together. Her gaze flicked to the window, then to the front door. Another sound followed, louder this time, the unmistakable crunch of gravel underfoot. Joseph straightened, his body tense. "Jimmy, Evelyn, stay here," he murmured, his tone sharp enough to silence any protest. He moved toward the door, his footsteps careful, his posture wary. Before Sharon could join him, the door burst inward with a violent crack, the chain snapping like thread. 3 masked figures stormed in, their presence a jarring contrast to the warm, cluttered room. The leader, a man with broad shoulders and a menacing gait, pointed at Joseph. "Don't move," the man barked, his voice a gravelly snarl. Joseph hesitated for only a second before he lunged forward, instinct overriding caution. His fist collided with the closest intruder, sending him stumbling into the wall. But the retaliation was swift. A second figure swung a blunt object, catching Joseph in the ribs. He crumpled with a pained gasp, clutching his side. "Sharon," he rasped, struggling to rise as the leader grabbed her arm. Evelyn screamed, her voice piercing, as another intruder dragged her toward the door. Jimmy froze, his small frame trembling as he clutched the edge of the couch. "Take them and go," the leader ordered, shoving Sharon toward the exit. "Leave the kid, too small to bother with." Joseph crawled forward, his breath labored. "Don't touch them," he gasped, reaching for the leader's leg. A swift kick sent him sprawling, his head striking the floor. Jimmy's paralysis broke as the intruders disappeared into the night, Sharon's and Evelyn's muffled cries echoing down the street. He stumbled toward his father, kneeling beside him. "Dad," he whispered, shaking Joseph's shoulder. "Dad, wake up!" Joseph's eyes fluttered open, his voice barely audible. "Run, Jimmy, get help." Jimmy hesitated, his eyes darting to the gaping door, the empty street beyond. Then he bolted into the night, his small feet pounding against the pavement, leaving the shattered remnants of his family behind. The night was a quiet, indifferent witness to Jimmy's frantic footsteps. He sprinted along the empty streets, his small frame trembling in the biting November air. The wind cut through his thin jacket, carrying with it the faint metallic tang of blood, his father's blood smeared across his hands and shirt. His breath came in jagged gasps, his tears blurring the uneven pavement beneath his feet. The suburban neighborhood that had always felt so familiar now loomed eerily foreign, its neat rows of houses silhouetted against the orange glow of distant streetlights. Shadows pooled between parked cars and trash bins, each one threatening to spring to life. Jimmy's heart raced, a wild drumbeat echoing in his ears. Keep running. Don't stop. Find someone. Anyone. His sneakers slapped against the pavement as he turned a corner, the sound too loud in the otherwise still night. He slowed, his chest heaving, his knees threatening to buckle. His small hands clutched his sides, sticky with drying blood. Ahead, a wrought-iron gate rose against the dark, its ornate design glinting faintly in the moonlight. Beyond it lay a sprawling estate, its driveway lined with carefully manicured hedges. A man stood near the gate, silhouetted by the soft glow of a garden lantern. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a posture that exuded quiet confidence. His hands were in the pockets of a tailored coat, his head tilted slightly as though lost in thought. Jimmy staggered forward, his vision narrowing. "Help!" he croaked, his voice cracking under the weight of his terror. The man turned sharply, his gaze locking onto the small figure stumbling toward him. At first, he froze, his brow furrowing. Then, as Jimmy came into view, his expression shifted. Shock, confusion, and something deeper flickered across his face. "What happened?" The man's voice was deep and steady, but laced with urgency. He crossed the distance between them in long strides, kneeling to Jimmy's level. They took them," Jimmy stammered, his words tumbling out in broken fragments. "Mom, Evelyn, they hurt Dad. I ran." The man placed a firm but gentle hand on Jimmy's shoulder, grounding him. "Breathe, kid. Slow down. Who took them? Where?" Jimmy shook his head, his tears falling faster now. "I don't know. They wore masks. 3 of them. They hit Dad and he's not moving." The man's jaw tightened, his eyes scanning Jimmy's face. Then his gaze fell to the boy's shirt, streaked with blood. A flicker of something unreadable crossed his face. A memory, sharp and unbidden. Nathan Lancaster stood abruptly, his mind yanking him back to another night. Years ago. Shards of glass glittered like stars on the asphalt, the cold metal of the steering wheel beneath his trembling fingers. His mother's voice, a distant echo, drowned out by the wail of sirens. He blinked hard, dispelling the memory. This wasn't then. This was now. And this boy needed him. "What's your name?" Nathan asked, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. Jimmy Miller," the boy stuttered, clutching his sides. Nathan straightened, pulling a sleek phone from his coat pocket. "All right, Jimmy. I'm calling someone who can help." His fingers moved deftly over the screen. "Sheriff Ford." The phone barely rang once, before a gruff, no-nonsense voice answered. "Lancaster, what's going on?" "There's been an attack," Nathan said, his tone clipped. "A boy, Jimmy Miller. His mother and sister have been taken. His father is injured. I'll explain the rest when you get here. Meet me at the Miller residence." "I'm on my way," came the reply. Nathan ended the call and knelt beside Jimmy again. "We're going back to your house," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "The sheriff is meeting us there." Jimmy's eyes widened. "But what if they come back?" "They won't," Nathan said firmly. "I'll make sure of it." The drive back to the Miller home was silent, save for the soft hum of the car's engine. Jimmy sat in the passenger seat, clutching a blanket Nathan had retrieved from the trunk. His small hands trembled, the edges of his nails caked with dried blood. Nathan kept his eyes on the road, his grip on the wheel tightening each time he glanced at the boy. When they arrived, the scene was as Jimmy had described, the door hanging ajar, the house eerily quiet. Nathan's breath caught when he saw Joseph sprawled on the floor, his face pale, a pool of blood darkening beneath him. Sheriff Henry Ford's cruiser pulled up moments later, the red and blue lights casting a grim glow over the scene. Nathan knelt by Joseph, his voice low. "Joseph, it's Nathan Lancaster. Help is here, can you hear me?" Joseph's eyelids fluttered, his lips moved, but the words were faint. Nathan leaned closer, catching the barely audible plea. "Save them, please. Save my family." Nathan swallowed hard, nodding. "I will." The violence that now filled every shadow in the Miller home appeared as if it had been caught mid-breath. The door creaked softly in the night breeze, swinging on broken hinges. Inside, the air was heavy, with the sharp scent of iron and the faint tang of fear. The overturned furniture, shattered picture frames, and the jagged remnants of a family's peace lay strewn across the living room. Nathan Lancaster stepped cautiously into the house, his sharp gaze taking in the scene. Behind him, Jimmy hesitated in the doorway, clutching the blanket tighter around his small frame. Sheriff Henry Ford, broad-shouldered and steady, entered next, his hand hovering near the holster at his side. "Stay here, Jimmy," Nathan said softly, glancing back at the boy. His voice carried a firm gentleness, a subtle reassurance that even now, some things could be controlled. Jimmy nodded, though his wide eyes stayed fixed on his father's crumpled form on the floor. Henry crouched beside Joseph, his expression grim. "He's alive," he muttered, fingers pressing lightly against Joseph's neck. "Pulse is faint, but it's there." Nathan knelt on Joseph's other side, his coat brushing against the darkened floor. "Joseph," he said, his voice low but urgent. "I'm Nathan. Can you hear me?" Joseph's eyelids fluttered, his face ashen and slick with sweat. He turned his head weakly toward Nathan, his breath coming in shallow, uneven gasps. His lips moved, but no sound escaped at first. Nathan leaned closer, catching the whispered words. "Save them," Joseph rasped, his voice fragile, each syllable a strain. His hand reached out, gripping Nathan's sleeve with surprising strength. "Please, Sharon, Evelyn." Nathan felt the weight of the plea settle heavily on his chest. He placed his hand over Joseph's, his jaw tightening. "I'll bring them back. I promise." Joseph's fingers slackened, his arm dropping limply to his side. His eyes closed as he slipped into unconsciousness. Jimmy darted forward, dropping to his knees beside his father. "Dad!" he cried, his small hands gripping Joseph's unresponsive arm. Tears streaked down his face, leaving clean trails through the blood and grime on his cheeks. "Please don't leave me, Dad." Please wake up." "We need an ambulance," Henry said briskly, rising to his full height and pulling his radio from his belt. "Dispatch, this is Ford. I have a male, late 40s, with severe head trauma and significant blood loss. Requesting immediate medical assistance at 14 Ridgewood Lane." As the sheriff spoke, Nathan's eyes caught something on the far wall. A chilling message, written in bold, crude strokes of blood. $500,000 in 48 hours, or you'll receive your wife and daughter's corpses. He stood, his movements deliberate as his gaze scanned the room again. "They knew what they were doing," he murmured. "This wasn't random." Henry followed his line of sight to the message. His face darkened, the hard lines of his jaw tightening. Professional by the looks of it. They wanted to make an impression, and they've done it. Nathan turned toward him. "Then we make one back." The sheriff shook his head slowly. "Lancaster, listen to me." His voice was steady, but firm. "These aren't amateurs. They're calculating, and they've done this before. You've got money and influence, but if you get too deep into this—" "I'm already in," Nathan interrupted, his tone sharp but controlled. "They took Sharon and Evelyn. You expect me to walk away?" "I expect you to let me do my job," Henry shot back. His eyes locked with Nathan's, both men refusing to yield. After a tense pause, Henry's voice softened. "I'm not saying don't help. I'm saying know your limits. These are dangerous people, Nathan. They won't hesitate to spill more blood." Nathan's silence stretched just long enough to show he'd heard the words, even if he didn't agree. His eyes shifted back to Jimmy, who stood frozen by the door, watching them with the raw vulnerability of a child whose world had just been torn apart. "We'll talk limits later," Nathan said quietly. "Right now that boy needs to know someone's fighting for his family." Henry exhaled heavily, but nodded. "Fine. But we do this smart. No impulsive moves." The wail of approaching sirens broke the heavy quiet of the night. Moments later, paramedics rushed in, their efficient movements a stark contrast to the chaos around them. Jimmy clung to Nathan's side, his small hand gripping tightly to the hem of Nathan's coat as Joseph was loaded onto a stretcher. "Where are they taking him?" Jimmy's voice was barely audible, his tears glinting in the dim light. "The hospital," Nathan said, kneeling to meet Jimmy's eye level. "He's going to be okay, but he needs time to heal. While he's resting, we're going to find your mum and sister. You have my word." Jimmy sniffed, his hands trembling as he wiped his face. "You promise?" Nathan nodded, his voice steady. "I promise." Henry stepped forward, his hat in hand. "Nathan, let's talk strategy. The clock's already ticking." Nathan glanced at him, then back at Jimmy. "Go with the paramedics," he said gently to the boy. "I'll be right behind you." As Jimmy reluctantly climbed into the ambulance, Nathan stood, the weight of Joseph's plea and the blood-streaked wall burning in his mind. 48 hours, he murmured to Henry. "We're going to need every second." The Miller home was still as the paramedics pulled away, the flashing lights of the ambulance disappearing into the night. Nathan and Henry stood in the driveway, silence stretching between them. Jimmy's pale face haunted Nathan's mind, but there was no time to dwell on it. Inside, the house remained frozen in chaos. Nathan's gaze fell to the blood-streaked message on the wall once more, before sweeping across the room. Every overturned piece of furniture, every shard of broken glass seemed like a clue waiting to be uncovered. "Start from the entry point," Henry instructed, his tone crisp as he motioned toward the front door. They forced their way in. Whoever did this knew the layout, or at least enough to get in and out without hesitation. Nathan followed Henry's lead, his sharp eyes scanning the floor. Near the doorframe, a glint caught his attention. Kneeling down, he picked up a stubbed-out cigar, the wrapper still intact enough to display a distinct logo. "Recognize this?" Nathan asked, holding it up. Henry leaned over, frowning. "That's a hell of a clue. Not your everyday corner store variety." Nathan turned the cigar over in his fingers, his thoughts narrowing. "This is a Bravado No. 9 rare, expensive. Only a handful of places in the city sell these." Henry raised an eyebrow. "And you'd know that how?" Nathan allowed a small, humorless smile. "Let's just say I've been to enough high-stakes meetings where these were passed around like candy." Henry took the cigar and slipped it into an evidence bag. "This could narrow down our list. Not many people drop this kind of money for a smoke. I will have the list soon." Nathan nodded but said nothing, his thoughts already shifting. Every detail sharpened into a path forward. He was determined to seize this opportunity. The sterile scent of disinfectant clung to the air in the hospital, sharp and cold. Jimmy sat beside his father's hospital bed, his small hand clutching Joseph's limp one. Wires and monitors surrounded the man, their soft beeping the only sign of life. A doctor stepped in, her white coat swaying as she approached. She crouched to Jimmy's level, her expression calm, but weighted with sympathy. "Your dad is stable for now," she said softly, "but he's in a coma. He'll need a few days, maybe longer, to recover." The words landed like stones in Jimmy's chest. "But he will wake up, right?" he stammered, his voice cracking. "We're hopeful," the doctor replied, "but it will take time." Jimmy's lip quivered as tears spilled over, silent at first, then breaking into muffled sobs. He pressed his face into his father's hand, his small shoulders shaking. Nathan's assistant, a sharply dressed woman with warm eyes, stood nearby. She approached gently, her voice kind. "Jimmy, Mr. Lancaster sent me to take you home. He wants you to be somewhere safe." Jimmy hesitated, his tear-streaked face turning toward her. "But my dad—" "He's in good hands," she assured him. "Come on, let's get you settled." With one last look at his father, Jimmy let her lead him away, his heart heavy with the weight of the night. Later, at Nathan's estate, the weight of the night bore heavily on Jimmy, who sat curled up on a couch, the blanket still wrapped around his shoulders. The boy's small frame looked even smaller against the grand backdrop of Nathan's study, a room filled with polished wood, leather-bound books, and the faint scent of aged paper. Nathan poured a glass of water, setting it down on the table in front of Jimmy. "Drink," he said gently, sitting across from him. "You need to stay strong for your dad and for when we bring Sharon and Evelyn back." Jimmy hesitated, his small hands gripping the glass. "Do you think they're scared?" he inquired, his voice barely audible above a whisper. "My mum and Evelyn." Nathan leaned forward, his expression softening. "They're brave, just like you were tonight running for help. That bravery is going to bring them home." Jimmy stared at the glass, his eyes brimming with tears. "I'm not brave. I was scared the whole time." Nathan smiled faintly. "Being scared doesn't mean you're not brave. It means you're human. When I was about your age, I was scared too." Jimmy glanced up, curiosity flickering through his tears. "Why?" Nathan leaned back, the memories of his childhood heavy in his chest. "My parents. They died in a car accident. I was the only one who made it out. For a long time, I didn't know what to do. I felt lost and afraid, just like you do now. But you know what I learned?" Jimmy shook his head, his eyes wide. Nathan continued, his voice steady. "Even when it feels like the world is falling apart, you can always find a way to keep going. And sometimes that means leaning on someone who's there to help." Jimmy nodded slowly, his grip on the glass relaxing. "You're helping us," he said softly. "I am," Nathan said, his tone firm. "And I won't stop until your family is whole again." As the night wore on, Nathan led Jimmy to a guest room to rest. The boy hesitated in the doorway, his eyes scanning the unfamiliar space. "You'll be safe here," Nathan assured him. "I'll be right down the hall if you need anything." Jimmy stepped inside, but something on Nathan's desk caught his eye, a framed photo of a man, stocky with a shaved head, sitting in a leather chair. Nathan noticed his hesitation. "Something wrong?" Nathan asked. Jimmy's eyes widened as he pointed to the photo. "That's him," he said, his voice trembling. "That's the man in the van. The one watching when they took my mom and Evelyn." Nathan's stomach dropped. He turned toward the photo, his mind racing. Stephen Garcia, one of the names on the cigar buyer list that Henry just sent over. A name that had crossed his desk more than once. A former mercenary turned shadowy figure in the city's underworld. "You're sure?" Nathan asked, his tone sharp but calm. Jimmy nodded vigorously. "I saw him. He was there." Nathan exhaled, his thoughts crystallizing. This was no longer just a random crime. This was a calculated move. And now, they had a face to match the chaos. Nathan picked up his phone and dialed Henry. "We've got a name," he said when the sheriff answered. "Stephen Garcia. He's connected to this." The line went silent for a moment before Henry replied, "That's a dangerous man, Lancaster. If he's involved, this just got a lot more complicated." Nathan's jaw tightened. "Then we'll deal with it, one way or another." As he hung up, Nathan glanced back at Jimmy, who stood silently, watching him. "You just gave us a big piece of the puzzle," Nathan said. "We're one step closer." Jimmy didn't respond, but the flicker of hope in his eyes was enough. The morning light crept faintly into Nathan's study, casting long shadows across the polished wood and leather. The air was heavy with silence, broken only by the faint shuffle of papers as Nathan reviewed the list Henry had sent, an exhaustive roster of those who had recently purchased Bravado No. 9 cigars. Stephen Garcia's name was prominently displayed. Nathan's grip on the paper tightened. Jimmy's revelation about the photo had been the confirmation they needed. Stephen Garcia wasn't just a random name anymore. He was the man in the van, the one who had coldly watched Sharon and Evelyn being taken. His phone buzzed, breaking his focus. It was Henry. Nathan answered immediately. "We've traced the van," Henry said without preamble. "City's outskirts. There's an old warehouse near the docks. It's been empty for years, but there's activity there now. Lights, movement." Nathan stood, his muscles taut with purpose. "That's where they're holding them." "Likely," Henry agreed. "But we can't rush this. I've got a team heading there now to surveil the place. We'll go in when the time is right." Nathan's jaw tightened. "And the ransom?" "If we can take them down without it, we will," Henry said. "But having the money ready gives us leverage if things go south." Nathan glanced at the clock. "I'll wire it over, just in case." Henry's head snapped up. "You can't be serious. That's $500,000. "I can afford it," Nathan cut in. "It's a loan. Joseph will repay it." Henry's voice sharpened. "That's not the point. This isn't just about money. You're putting yourself deeper into this." Nathan met Henry's gaze evenly. "I already told you I'm in. This isn't about me. It's about them. And if this is what it takes to bring them home, I'll do it." Jimmy watched from the edge of the room as Nathan hung up. He'd been quiet since the night before, his small frame perched on the oversized couch. The boy's eyes were rimmed with exhaustion, his hands gripping the edge of the blanket still wrapped around him. "Are we close to finding them?" Jimmy asked, his voice small but steady. Nathan knelt beside him, meeting his gaze. "We're close. Henry's team found where they might be. Now, we just have to make sure we get them out safely." Jimmy nodded, but his lips trembled. "Do you think they're okay?" Nathan placed a reassuring hand on Jimmy's shoulder. I do, and we'll bring them back. That's a promise. Jimmy stared into Nathan's steady eyes, finding strength in them. I believe you, he whispered. The drive to the docks was tense. Nathan sat beside Henry in the sheriff's cruiser, the low hum of the engine a backdrop to their conversation. This isn't just about a ransom, Nathan said, his tone clipped. Garcia's name wasn't random. He's connected to something bigger. I know, Henry replied grimly, but let's focus on getting Sharon and Evelyn out first. We'll dig deeper into Garcia's ties later. As the warehouse came into view, Nathan's eyes narrowed. It was a hulking structure. Its once red exterior faded to rust and grime. A single light flickered near the entrance, the only sign of life from the outside. Henry parked a safe distance away, pulling binoculars from the glove compartment. Let's see what we're dealing with. Nathan waited as Henry scanned the area. 2 guards outside, Henry murmured. Armed but not professional, probably hired muscle. We'll need to coordinate the breach carefully. Nathan's hand clenched around the phone in his pocket. Sharon and Evelyn were in there, somewhere beyond those crumbling walls. Every second felt like a lifetime, yet he knew not to rush in. This wasn't about him. It was about them, and he would do whatever it took to bring them home. The tension in the air was palpable as Nathan stood near the warehouse, the cold bite of the wind slicing through his coat. The dockside was eerily silent, the occasional groan of rusted metal the only sound breaking the stillness. Henry lowered his binoculars, his brow furrowed in concentration. 2 guards at the front, pacing, Henry murmured. Looks like they're armed but nothing heavy. They're watching the entrance, not expecting an assault. Nathan nodded, his jaw tightening. His mind wasn't on the guards, but on what lay beyond the crumbling walls of the warehouse. Sharon, Evelyn. The thought of them tied up, terrified, drove a hot spike of anger through his chest. Henry's voice broke his focus. Listen, Nathan. When we go in, you stay back. My team knows how to handle this. Nathan's gaze flicked to the sheriff, his expression resolute. I'm not staying back, Henry. They're in there because of me. Henry exhaled sharply. You're helping because you care, and I respect that. But this isn't your fight. Nathan's voice was steady, but firm. It is now. Before Henry could argue, a soft chime broke the silence. Nathan's phone buzzed, and he glanced at the screen to see Jimmy's name. Stepping aside, he answered, Nathan? Jimmy's small voice came through, laced with fear. Are you there yet? Yes, Jimmy, we're here, Nathan replied, keeping his tone calm. But you don't need to worry. We'll bring them back. There was a pause. Then Jimmy's voice quivered. I want to come with you. They're my family. Nathan closed his eyes for a moment, steadying himself. Jimmy, I know you want to help, but it's too dangerous. You've done so much already, more than most grown-ups could. But now, you need to let me and Henry take it from here. But what if something goes wrong? Jimmy whispered, his words tumbling over each other. What if they hurt them? Because I'm not there. Nathan's voice softened. Jimmy, I promise you, we won't let anything happen to them. I need you to trust me. Jimmy sniffed on the other end of the line, but his voice steadied. Okay, but you have to bring them back, please. I will, Nathan said, his words carrying the weight of a vow. As he hung up, Henry gave him a sideways glance. You sure you're ready for this? Nathan met his gaze evenly. There's no choice but to be ready. In the dim light of the surveillance van, parked near the docks, Nathan and Henry watched as the SWAT team set up their positions. Are you listening? Not everyone can be this attentive. Please leave a comment, iced Americano, to prove you're listening. Thanks a lot. The air inside was heavy with anticipation, the quiet chatter of officers discussing strategy, a stark contrast to the tension outside. Henry handed Nathan a pair of binoculars. "See for yourself." Nathan raised them to his eyes, scanning the warehouse. Through a cracked window, he saw a dimly lit interior. Two figures sat in chairs, their heads bowed, arms tied behind them. Sharon's auburn hair caught the faint glow of the overhead light, while Evelyn's small frame was slumped beside her. Nathan's throat tightened. "They're there," he said, his voice low. "They're alive." "Guard pacing near them," Henry added. "Single gun visible. Looks like they're keeping it minimal inside." Nathan lowered the binoculars, his pulse hammering in his ears. "We go now." Henry shook his head. "Not yet. We need to wait for the right moment. Rushing in could get them hurt." The frustration surged in Nathan's chest, but he knew Henry was right. Impatience could cost lives. He forced himself to take a steadying breath, his hands curling into fists. Nathan murmured, "We are running out of time." Henry glanced at him. "That's why we do this carefully. We can't afford mistakes." Nathan nodded reluctantly, his gaze fixed on the warehouse. Every fiber of his being screamed to act, but for now, he waited. Each passing second, a silent battle against the urgency clawing at him. The stage was set, the team prepared. Beyond the dim walls of the warehouse, Sharon and Evelyn waited, unaware that help was so close. And as the night deepened, so did Nathan's resolve. Whatever it took, he would bring them home. The night was a curtain of shadows as the SWAT team crept toward the warehouse. The soft crunch of boots on gravel was barely audible over the rustling wind. Nathan stood back near the surveillance van, his hands clenched at his sides, his eyes locked on the hulking silhouette of the building. Henry was at the forefront, leading his team with practiced precision. The guards at the entrance were distracted, their pacing sluggish. One of them lit a cigarette, the faint glow of the ember briefly illuminating his face. He muttered something to his partner, their voices low, unaware of the figures closing in from the darkness. With a sudden, fluid motion, the SWAT team pounced. A muffled scuffle, the sharp click of zip ties, and the guards were neutralized without a single shot fired. The team signaled to Henry, who motioned for them to proceed. Nathan's heart raced as he watched the team disappear into the warehouse. The seconds stretched unbearably. He wasn't used to waiting, to feeling this helpless. Every instinct screamed for him to follow, but he knew he would only jeopardize the mission. Inside, the dim light cast long, flickering shadows on the cracked walls. Sharon and Evelyn sat slumped in their chairs, their hands bound tightly behind them. Evelyn's head drooped, but Sharon's gaze was sharp, defiant even in her exhaustion. A single guard paced near them, a rifle slung carelessly over his shoulder. The SWAT team fanned out, moving with silent precision. One officer signaled to Henry, pointing toward the guard. Henry nodded, creeping closer, his eyes locked on the man. Then, a clatter. A metal pipe tumbled from a stack of crates, the noise reverberating through the warehouse like a gunshot. The guard spun, his rifle raised, shouting into the void. "Who's there?" In the chaos, one of the kidnappers bolted from the shadows, sprinting toward the back exit. Nathan, who had edged closer to the building, saw the figure dart past the window. Without thinking, he grabbed a nearby chair from a pile of debris and hurled it with all his strength. The chair struck the fleeing man square in the back, sending him sprawling to the ground. Henry was on him in seconds, pinning him down and snapping handcuffs around his wrists. Back inside, the SWAT team moved swiftly. The pacing guard was subdued with a clean strike to the back of his head, his rifle clattering to the floor. Two officers rushed to Sharon and Evelyn, cutting the ropes that bound them. Nathan burst in, just as Sharon was pulled to her feet. Her eyes widened when she saw him, relief and disbelief flooding her expression. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice hoarse but steady. "Why are you here?" Nathan knelt in front of her, working on the ropes around her wrists. "I'm Nathan Lancaster," he said simply, glancing at her briefly before continuing. "Jimmy ran to me for help. I promised him I'd bring you back." Her eyes softened, though the confusion remained. "Jimmy," she whispered, tears pooling in her eyes. "He's safe." Nathan nodded, freeing her hands. "He's safe. He's waiting for you." As Sharon pulled Evelyn into a protective hug, Nathan turned to Henry, who was securing the ransom money from a nearby bag. It remained untouched, a cold testament to the kidnapper's failure. "Everyone clear?" Henry called out, his voice steady but sharp. "All clear," one of the SWAT members replied. "No sign of additional threats." Nathan exhaled deeply, the tension in his chest releasing slightly as he looked back at Sharon and Evelyn. Their relief was palpable, their breathing heavy, but no longer panicked. "Let's get them out of here," Nathan said, his voice quiet but firm. Outside, the night seemed softer as they emerged from the warehouse. The crisp air hit Sharon and Evelyn's faces, a stark contrast to the suffocating stillness inside. Nathan guided them toward one of the waiting vehicles, his hand resting lightly on Evelyn's shoulder as she clung to her mother. "Thank you," Sharon murmured, her voice breaking. "I don't know how to—" "You don't have to," Nathan interrupted gently. "Jimmy is waiting for you. That's all that matters." As the car doors closed behind them, Nathan stood beside Henry, watching as the vehicle pulled away into the night. The warehouse loomed behind them, empty now, but Nathan's mind was far from quiet. "You did good in there," Henry said, his tone begrudgingly approving. Nathan didn't respond immediately. His gaze lingered on the horizon, where the car carrying Sharon and Evelyn disappeared. "This isn't over," he said finally. "Stephen Garcia, he's still out there." Henry sighed, his hands resting on his hips. "We'll deal with him. Tonight, we won." Nathan nodded, though the victory felt incomplete. Sharon and Evelyn were safe, but the shadow of Garcia's involvement loomed large. As the first hints of dawn broke through the dark, Nathan's resolve only hardened. Whatever came next, he'd be ready. The warehouse was a desolate shell now, stripped of its menace but still holding secrets. Nathan lingered near the entrance, the faint scent of rust and oil clinging to the cold air. The SWAT team, efficient and methodical, swept through the remaining rooms, cataloging evidence. Henry emerged from one of the offices, a manila folder in hand and a grim expression etched across his face. "We've got something," Henry said, holding up the folder. "Documents, ledgers, correspondence, and a name." Nathan stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "Stephen Garcia." Henry shook his head. "Bigger. Randy Tucker." Nathan's breath caught, the name ringing familiar. "Joseph's old business partner?" Henry nodded, flipping open the folder to reveal neatly typed correspondence. "It appears that Randy has been exerting influence. Garcia and the others were simply his leverage." Nathan's mind raced as he skimmed the papers. Randy's name was scrawled across invoices and payment records, all tied to shadowy accounts and questionable transactions. Among the documents was a blueprint of the Miller home, annotated with meticulous detail. "This wasn't about random extortion," Nathan muttered, his jaw tightening. "This was personal." Henry tapped one of the papers. "Randy's trying to disappear. Flight scheduled for tonight. Private jet, leaving from the executive terminal at Westport." Nathan straightened, his resolve hardening. "Not if I can help it." At Nathan's estate, he paced his study, his phone pressed to his ear. His assistant, quick and efficient, relayed updates as Nathan coordinated his next move. "Contact the airport," Nathan instructed. "Randy Tucker's flight needs to be grounded. Use my name if you have to." There was a brief pause before the assistant replied. "Understood. I'll take care of it." Nathan ended the call, his mind already jumping to the next step. Henry, sitting nearby, watched him with a mix of admiration and caution. "You know this isn't just about Sharon and Evelyn anymore," Henry said. "You're digging into dangerous territory." Nathan met his gaze, unwavering. Randy made it personal the moment he targeted them. "I'm not letting him slip away." Henry sighed but nodded. "We need to move fast. If he gets airborne, he's gone." The Westport Executive Terminal buzzed with quiet activity, the hum of private jets filling the air. Randy Tucker strode across the tarmac, his tailored suit and expensive briefcase masking the desperation in his eyes. He glanced over his shoulder, his movements sharp and jittery. A sharp voice crackled through the radio of the ground crew, drawing Randy's attention. He frowned, his steps faltering, as a uniformed officer approached. "Mr. Tucker?" the officer called, his tone neutral but firm. Randy's hand tightened around the handle of his briefcase. "Yes?" "I'm afraid your flight's been delayed," the officer said, stepping closer. "We'll need you to come with us for further questioning." Before Randy could respond, Henry emerged from a nearby vehicle, his badge glinting under the terminal lights. Nathan followed, his presence calm but commanding. "Going somewhere, Randy?" Henry asked, his voice sharp. Randy's face paled, his mask of composure slipping. "I don't know what you think." Nathan stepped forward, cutting him off. "We know exactly what you've been doing. Garcia, the kidnapping, the ransom. It's over." Randy searched for a rebuttal, but the weight of the evidence and the men in front of him cornered him. As Randy was led away in handcuffs, Nathan and Henry watched in silence. The night air was crisp, carrying with it a sense of resolution, though Nathan's mind remained restless. "This won't undo what he's done," Nathan said quietly, his gaze fixed on the distant lights of the city. "No," Henry agreed, his voice measured. "But it'll stop him from doing it again." Nathan nodded, his thoughts turning to Sharon, Evelyn, and Jimmy. Randy's arrest was a victory, but there was still healing to be done. "Let's get back," Nathan said. "They'll need to know it's over." As they drove away from the terminal, the weight on Nathan's shoulders lightened slightly. Randy was caught, but Nathan knew the scars of the ordeal would linger. Still, he vowed to see it through, to help the Millers rebuild, and to ensure that no shadow of Randy's vendetta remained. Randy Tucker's protests filled the air as he was led into the brightly lit station, his polished shoes scraping against the tiled floor. "This is absurd," he barked, twisting against the firm grip of the officers. "I've done nothing wrong. You'll regret this." Henry stood at the edge of the room, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. "We've got a stack of evidence that says otherwise, Randy," he replied evenly. "Garcia's already talking. Sooner or later, you'll wish you had too." Randy's eyes darted around the room, his composure crumbling under the pressure. He opened his mouth to retort, but stopped short when Nathan entered, his presence commanding even without a word. Their eyes locked, and for the first time, Randy looked truly cornered. "You ruined lives for money and revenge," Nathan said, his voice low but carrying weight. "It's over." Randy sneered, but his shoulders slumped as the officers led him away. The click of the handcuffs echoed faintly, the sound punctuating the end of his plans. In a nearby room, Sharon sat with Evelyn on her lap, her arms wrapped tightly around her daughter. Her auburn hair was matted, her face pale, but her eyes burned with quiet strength. Henry stood across from her, taking notes as she recounted the nightmare of the past days. "They never touched Evelyn," Sharon said, her voice steady but hollow. "But they made threats. Said we'd never see Jimmy or Joseph again if we didn't cooperate." Henry nodded, his pen scratching across the paper. "You held up well. Most wouldn't have kept it together." Sharon glanced down at Evelyn, who clung to her mother's arm in silence. "I had to. For her." The door opened softly, and Nathan stepped inside. Sharon's eyes immediately met his, a flicker of gratitude softening her exhaustion. "You're the one who brought Jimmy to safety," she said. "And now this. I don't even know how to thank you." Nathan shook his head, his tone gentle. "There's no need for thanks. I just did what anyone should." Her lips trembled, and she let out a shaky breath. "That's not true. Most people wouldn't have done what you did." Nathan turned his gaze to Evelyn, who was watching him intently, her wide eyes reflecting a quiet resilience that belied her young age. "You were very brave, Evelyn," he said softly. The girl nodded, her voice a whisper. "Mommy told me to stay quiet, so I did." Nathan knelt to her level, a small, reassuring smile playing on his lips. "You did everything right. You helped your mom stay strong." Sharon's voice broke as she spoke. "Thank you for everything, for giving us hope when we didn't have any left." Nathan stood, his shoulders straightening. "The real heroes are in the other room," he said, gesturing toward the officers and SWAT team. "They carried out the significant tasks." Henry entered behind him, the weight of the case etched into his expression. "Garcia and the others are locked up. With Randy's arrest, we've tied it all together. It's done." Sharon exhaled, a deep, shaky breath that seemed to release the tension that had held her rigid for days. She hugged Evelyn tighter, her voice barely audible. "It's over." Nathan exchanged a look with Henry, both understanding that while the immediate danger had passed, the road to healing was just beginning. "We'll get you home soon," Nathan said. "Jimmy's waiting for you." As Nathan and Henry left the station, the dawn light began creeping over the horizon. The streets were quiet, the city waking slowly. Henry glanced sideways at Nathan. "You're sticking around, aren't you?" Nathan nodded. "Until the Millers are back on their feet." Henry smirked, his tone light but tinged with respect. "You're too stubborn for your own good." Nathan didn't respond immediately. He looked up at the faint light breaking through the night. "They deserve better after everything they've been through. If I can help make that happen, I will." Henry clapped him on the shoulder as they reached their cars. "Well, don't let me stop you." As Nathan drove home, the faces of Sharon, Evelyn, and Jimmy filled his thoughts. The ordeal had left its mark on all of them, but they were safe, together, and alive. And for now, that was enough. The warm sunlight spilled into the grand living room of Nathan's estate, a stark contrast to the cold, harrowing nights the Millers had endured. Jimmy sat on the plush couch, his small hands clutching the edge of a pillow as he stared at the door. His face, though calmer than the night before, still carried the weight of worry and longing. The sound of approaching footsteps broke the silence. Sharon and Evelyn entered, their faces lighting up as they spotted Jimmy. For a moment, the world seemed to pause. Then Jimmy bolted across the room, his arms outstretched. "Mom! Evelyn!" he cried, his voice breaking with emotion. Sharon dropped to her knees, wrapping her arms around both children, her tears streaming freely. "Jimmy," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Oh, my brave boy." Evelyn clung to her brother, her small fingers gripping his shirt as if afraid to let go. The three of them huddled together, their quiet sobs filling the room. Nathan stood back, watching the reunion with a faint smile, his heart heavy, yet hopeful. After a long moment, Jimmy turned, his tear-streaked face glowing with gratitude. He ran to Nathan and threw his arms around him in a tight hug. "Thank you," he said, his voice muffled against Nathan's jacket. "Thank you for bringing them back." Nathan's hand rested gently on Jimmy's shoulder. "You don't have to thank me," he said softly. "You're the one who never gave up. You're the real hero here." Before Nathan could say more, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and his expression shifted. "It's the hospital," he said, stepping aside to take the call. Sharon's gaze followed him, her brow furrowing. "Is it Joseph?" she inquired, her voice barely raised above a whisper. Nathan nodded and answered the call. The doctor's voice came through, calm but upbeat. "Mr. Lancaster, I wanted to let you know that Joseph has regained consciousness. He's asking for his family." Nathan's lips curved into a small smile. "Thank you, Doctor. We'll be there soon." He turned to Sharon, who stood frozen, her hand over her mouth as tears welled up in her eyes again. "He's awake," Nathan said gently. "He's asking for you." The hospital room was bathed in the soft hum of machinery, the rhythmic beep of the monitor steady and reassuring. Joseph's eyes fluttered open, his vision slowly focusing on the familiar faces around him. Sharon sat by his side, her hand tightly clasped in his. Evelyn and Jimmy stood at the foot of the bed, their wide eyes filled with relief. "You're here," Joseph murmured, his voice hoarse but steady. "You're safe." Sharon nodded, her tears spilling onto her cheeks. "We're safe, Joseph. We're all safe." His gaze shifted, landing on Nathan, who stood near the door, arms crossed, but with a hint of a smile. "You," Joseph said, recognition dawning in his eyes. "You're the one who—" "Nathan Lancaster," Nathan interjected, stepping forward. "I helped where I could, but your family is stronger than you realize." Joseph's hand reached out, and Nathan clasped it firmly. "Thank you," Joseph said, his voice thick with emotion. "I owe you everything." Nathan shook his head. "You don't owe me a thing. The $500,000 I set aside is still untouched. It was only a loan if needed, but we didn't have to use it. Focus on recovering and rebuilding." Joseph exhaled deeply, the tension in his body easing as he looked around at his reunited family. "We will," he said, his voice filled with quiet determination. "We'll rebuild." A week later, the Miller family stood in their modest new apartment surrounded by boxes. The newly painted walls of the smaller but warm space served as a blank canvas for a new beginning. Sharon hung a picture of the four of them on the wall, a rare moment of peace captured before everything had fallen apart. Jimmy helped Evelyn unpack her toys, while Joseph carefully arranged books on a shelf, his movements slower but steadier than before. His strength was returning, and with it, his determination. Nathan arrived that afternoon, carrying a housewarming gift, a potted plant and a box of pastries. Jimmy greeted him at the door, his face lighting up. "Nathan, come see." Nathan followed the boy into the apartment, smiling at the scene of quiet chaos. "Looks like you're settling in," he said. "We are," Joseph said, shaking Nathan's hand firmly. "It's not much, but it feels like home." "That's all that matters," Nathan replied. His gaze swept the room, landing on Sharon, who was unpacking dishes in the kitchen. "How's everyone holding up?" "Better," Sharon said, smiling. "Every day feels a little lighter." Evelyn tugged on Nathan's sleeve, her voice small but bright. "Look, Mommy hung the picture." Nathan turned to see the photo on the wall. He studied it for a moment, then nodded. "It's perfect." As the evening wore on, the Millers and Nathan sat around the small dining table, sharing stories and laughter. The heaviness of the past weeks lingered in their hearts, but it no longer defined them. Joseph raised his glass, a simple gesture, but one filled with meaning. "To new beginnings," he said, his voice strong and clear. "To new beginnings," the others echoed, their glasses clinking softly. Nathan looked around the table, the warmth of the moment settling into his chest. He had seen the worst of what people could do to one another. But tonight, he saw the best: resilience, hope, and the quiet strength of a family rebuilding their lives. As he stepped out into the crisp night air, Nathan paused, looking back at the apartment where laughter still spilled through the windows. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself a deep breath, and a small smile. The Millers were safe. They were healing. And that, for now, was enough. Months had passed, and the chill of winter had melted into the warmth of spring. The Miller family had moved into a cozy, sunlit house on the edge of the city, a space that symbolized fresh starts. The scent of fresh paint lingered in the air as Joseph hammered the final nail into a wooden shelf in his modest new office. His construction business, once teetering on collapse, was slowly finding its footing again. Each day brought new challenges, but with those challenges came hope. Jimmy walked home from school that afternoon, his backpack slung over one shoulder. The streets were alive with the chatter of children and the hum of passing cars. As he turned the corner near the park, he spotted a familiar figure sitting on a bench beneath a blooming cherry tree. "Nathan," Jimmy called, his face lighting up. He jogged over, his steps quickened with excitement. Nathan looked up from the book he had been reading, a smile spreading across his face. "Jimmy, how's school treating you?" Jimmy plopped down beside him, shrugging with the casual indifference only a child could muster. "It's okay, I guess. Math's still boring." Nathan chuckled, closing his book. "I think most people would agree with you there." Jimmy's face turned serious, his hands twisting nervously in his lap. "I just wanted to say thank you. Again. For everything." Nathan tilted his head, studying the boy. "You've thanked me plenty, Jimmy. You don't have to keep doing it." "I know," Jimmy said, his voice soft but firm, "but I mean it. You didn't have to help us, and you did. You saved us." Nathan leaned back, his gaze drifting to the horizon where the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. "You know," he began, his tone thoughtful, "when I lost my parents, I didn't think I'd ever find purpose again. Helping your family reminded me that even in the hardest moments, there's a way forward." Jimmy looked at him, his young eyes filled with understanding beyond his years. "You're like family to us now." Nathan's throat tightened at the boy's words, but he managed a smile. "That means a lot, Jimmy." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky shift and change. The cherry blossoms rustled in the breeze, their petals falling softly like snow onto the grass. "You know," Nathan said finally, "this is the part where I usually give some big, inspiring speech. But I think you already know everything you need to." Jimmy grinned. "Yeah, I think I do." As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the park, Nathan stood and ruffled Jimmy's hair. "Go on home. Your mum's probably waiting with something good for dinner." Jimmy hopped up, his smile wide. "See you soon?" Nathan nodded. "Count on it." Jimmy took off down the street, his laughter ringing out as he ran. Nathan watched him go, a deep sense of peace settling over him. The boy's resilience, the family's strength. They were reminders of why he had stepped in, of what truly mattered. As the last rays of sunlight faded, Nathan turned and began walking toward his car. The road ahead was unknown, but for the first time in a long while, he felt ready for whatever came next. Behind him, the cherry blossoms continued to fall, the petals catching the light as they drifted gently to the ground, symbols of renewal, hope, and the enduring bonds formed through shared trials. If this film touches your heart, leave your mark with a like, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel to explore more meaningful stories with us. Share your feelings with us and tell us your own stories. Every word you share is a building block that helps create our strong and enduring community. Together, we'll create a warm space where everyone can share and connect. Finally, don't miss the incredible stories coming your way soon. We're always here to bring you the best selections, full of deep values, yet entertaining. See you there.